Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. We have Jannik Sinner versus Carlos Alcaraz for the 2025 US Open final. Cannot wait to get into this one. It is their 15th meeting and the head-to-head is 9-5 in favor of Carlos Alcaraz. But Jannik Sinner is fresh off that Wimbledon final, of course, where he came out in 4 sets very convincingly. They did play the Cincinnati final, well, part of it. Alcaraz was 5-love up, but probably not reflective of how the match might have gone. Jannik, of course, ill and then had to retire because of that illness. They both looked very good at the US Open. Carlos has not dropped a single set. Jannik only a couple, and there's a lot on the line. Whoever wins this match will be the world #1 come the rankings post US Open. So yeah, there's a lot of bragging rights, of course, with the head-to-head, with this year as a whole, because Jannik's won 2 out of the 3 slams so far. Carlos just the 1. Will they split the slams again like they did in 2024, for example? There's a lot of history on the line, as always, because both these guys are so young and they are lighting up the tour right now. And it really is if you want to start putting labels on it, it is almost like a big 2. Before we do, of course, get into the detail, first of all, thank you to our partners for providing us with some great insights, TennisViz and Tennis Insights. Also, do hit that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Shout out to our members as well. We're going to break this down in a few different ways. So first of all, I'm going to talk about what is going to potentially be on the line. Then we're going to talk about their head-to-head, then their route to the final. I'll then go into the Tennis Insight, tactically break down the matchup, and ultimately give you guys my prediction. Okay, so let's first of all talk about what's on the line. So there's a few interesting stats and impressive ones. #1, Jannik Sinner is the 8th man to reach all 4 Grand Slam finals in 1 season. And he's the youngest to do so in the Open era at the age of just 24. For Sinner, he's also on a hard-court winning streak at the majors, so Grand Slams, of 27 matches, which is equal Djokovic's best. Federer is the only person and player to have a longer winning streak on hard courts, which is 40 from 2005 to 2008. Wow, ridiculous. And Sinner will be looking to try and get as close to that as possible, but he has, of course, Carlos Alcaraz in his way, which is going to be a very tough and stern test. Sinner's looking to win his 5th Grand Slam, and all of his Grand Slams, bar Wimbledon, of course, have been on hard courts. For Carlos, there's a lot on the line for him as well. It's an interesting stat, though, is that he is the first player since Roger Federer in 2015 to not drop a single set en route to the final. So 10 years since that run from Federer, ultimately lost in the final. For Alcaraz, he'll be hoping to have a different fate in his final coming up, of course, but he's looked imperious and some real noticeable changes, I think, in his mentality and attitude towards certain points in games and pressure points. We'll get into that in a second. Let's then break down the head-to-head. So look, Carlos won, well, quote unquote, won the last match in Cincinnati. As I said, I don't think it really counts as a win. Jannik won at Wimbledon. That was a really impressive win from my perspective, 4 sets. And Carlos had won the previous 2 Wimbledon editions. Then they played an absolute epic at Roland Garros, of course, 5 sets. And Jannik had, look, he had it in the bag almost. Well, he did have it in the bag with with match points and 2 sets to love up. You just think, okay, he's going to get it done. Wasn't to be. Alcaraz came out on top, and Alcaraz had beaten him. So if we include that Roland Garros win, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times before the Wimbledon loss to Jannik. And if we're talking about specifically outdoor hard court, so 1-2, so 2-1, 2-all, 3-2, 4-2. I'm not going to count Cincinnati, so 4-2 head-to-head in favor of Carlos. So Jannik is, quote-unquote, the hard court king, but in this matchup, that historically hasn't been the case. Carlos has actually got the better of Jannik. Let's talk about the route to, or their routes even, to the final. So Sinner played Kopriva, Popyrin, don't don't know why he said Popyrin like that, but Kopriva Popyrin in the first couple of rounds, won those in straight sets very convincingly, then dropped the first set against Shapovalov and then went on to win in 4 sets. Then a very, very clinical performance against Alexander Bublik, only dropping 3 games. Then against Musetti, it was a similar story, only dropping 7 games in straight sets. And then against Felix Auger-Aliassime, he actually lost the second set 6-3, but went on to win in 4 sets ultimately. For Carlos Alcaraz, as I said, he hasn't dropped a single set. He's beat Opelka, Bellucci, Darderi, Rinderknech, Lehechka, and then a very impressive performance against 24 Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic, 6-4, 7-6, 6-2. And Carlos, in that match, there were some real things that stood out to me. And we'll touch upon that in a second. Before we do, let's talk about this tennis insight. So there's a graphic I'm going to bring up on screen, and this essentially is Sinner, and his player average is his average over the last 52 weeks. The selected matches is the specific matches that he's played against Carlos Alcaraz in the last 52 weeks and the metrics that compares. So let's look at Jannik Sinner. So I'm not going to go through every single stat, but I'm going to go through a few of them. Serve quality is a big one. That's down by 0.5, so from 8.2 to 7.7. That's a big drop off. A lot of that will be down to the return quality of Carlos Alcaraz in those matches. Of course, it's the 52-week average for all of his matches and that player average. And then, of course, we're talking about selected matches. So that is when playing against Alcaraz. So also a big drop in conversion, 61% against Alcaraz, 74% generally. And that, of course, is converting. It's the percentage of points converted when on the front foot, when you have momentum in the points or in attack. His in attack percentage, interestingly, is the same. And there's a big drop off on baseline points won as well, which is to be expected because Carlos is so good defensively and, of course, has a lot of variety from the back of the court. So it's not a surprise that Carlos is able to win his fair share of points from the baseline. Backhand, forehand quality and return quality all do increase though against Carlos, and that's probably with Jannik understanding, especially on forehand and backhand, that he needs to raise his level. Forehand, sorry, is level at 8.8. Return quality, I think he gets probably feels like he gets more looks on the Carlos Alcaraz serve, and that may not be the case as of late in the last few months, but on a 52-week average basis, that would make sense. Then if we look at Carlos Alcaraz, so he also drops off on serve, and again, Sinner is an incredible returner. That could be why. His return quality also increases by 0.4. That's a big one. And you can see that generally Carlos increases his game quite substantially against Jannik, because you can see forehand quality goes up, backhand quality goes up, steal score goes up by a little bit. Baseline points won down from 55 to 50%. So it's a similar drop off to Jannik. Conversion score, though, is very similar, 71% to 67%. If we compare that to Jannik, of course, his dropped by 13%. And then his in attack is slightly down, but from 25 to 23%. So has to defend a bit more against Jannik than he does against other players. But I think what's impressive here is that if we look specifically at the backhand quality, he knows that in the ad corner, in the ad court exchange, he needs to work a lot harder and the quality needs to be a lot higher for him to avoid getting hurt in that ad court exchange. And that's something that I think historically he's worked on a lot against Jannik, because he used to get eaten alive in that exchange. And that used to be a real issue against Jannik. And it's something that he shored up really impressively, I have to say. And now he's in a position, I think, where he feels very comfortable on that wing. And we saw him against Novak specifically, actually matching Novak in the ad court exchange. And I would say historically, Novak is the best of all time when it comes to that specific exchange. But Carlos has really shored up his defense. He looks super rock solid from that corner, and he's able to transition from defense to attack pretty seamlessly as well. And he has the in-twin into our forehand, which is really damaging. And the backhand cross and the angles he's finding and the backhand line are all very potent as well. So he's got a lot of options in that corner, and that makes him very dangerous. Of course, the backhand slice as well. Where will this match be won and lost then? So there's a few different things I think we can quickly discuss, and I'm not going to go into every single detail because this is a matchup we've seen a number of times recently. I think if you've watched the matchups, you understand vaguely how it's potentially going to play out. But there's a few tactics that I think we should point out. So number one is a drop shot that Jannik Sinner utilized quite effectively against Carlos. And that's normally a shot that Carlos, of course, causes damage with himself. Jannik isn't known for his drop shot, but he utilized that really well. And it was actually like a cross-court drop shot that he played very well with the forehand wing. And it caused a lot of trouble for Alcaraz at Wimbledon. And I imagine he'll be trying to utilize that again at Flushing Meadows. He didn't necessarily win the point straight away with that drop shot, but in a lot of cases, he went on to win the point ultimately. Carlos tried to utilize the forehand drop shot quite a bit against Novak, and interestingly, the backhand drop shot worked okay the couple of times he used it. With the forehand drop shot, which he normally uses more, it wasn't working. He made a lot of mistakes into the net. It wasn't being executed particularly well, so I wonder how much he will try and go to that versus Jannik. But one thing I noticed is that generally speaking, there's still some flashy moments from Carlos, and we're always going to see that because that is part of who he is. As he said, he wants to be out there on court and enjoy it, and that will mean playing extravagant, flashy shots at times. But I do feel that he is more selective about when he plays those shots. I feel like in the pressure points, he is a lot more mature in the way that he approaches those points now. And if you look at that tiebreaker versus Novak, that maturity really shone through. And I think it's an age thing, but it's also an experience thing that's come through. He's realized that he needs to be more selective about how he plays in certain moments. And that just means that his tennis IQ has improved even further. And that's a real positive, I think, moving forward. I think second serve return points are going to be really crucial. I talked about this in the women's final preview, and that ended up being quite true. And I feel like nowadays, especially on the ATP Tour, second serve points won are just so crucial on serve and return. And yeah, I mean, Jannik has been pretty good off second serve. I'm just looking through. I mean, he's got, on average, he's winning about, let's say, 65% of his second serve points won. For Alcaraz, he's not quite as high. Oh no, actually, hold on. He's probably around the same, actually. In fact, I reckon he's a bit higher, around 72%. I think that's going to be quite crucial. Obviously, if someone's going to end up serving 80% of first serves in, it then becomes less relevant. But I do feel like both players will go for their first serves. It doesn't make sense to not try and hit their spots and go safe, because we know how damaging the return can be from both these guys. The pace, precision and depth they can put on the ball can be very tough then to combat. But I do feel like, because they're quicker hard courts as well, we are going to see some lung busting rallies at times, but the guys hit the ball so hard, and as soon as one of them gets a stranglehold on the point, it's almost ultimately over straight away. I think whoever comes out on top in the shorter points will end up winning. I think the second serve points have a part to play. My prediction is going to be Carlos Alcaraz in 4 sets to win his second US Open title. He's looked very good, and I just feel that there is this very clear mentality that I think puts him in good stead. Sinner has looked very good as well, but Felix showed that he is vulnerable by taking a set off him. The two Canadians, of course, took a set off him. He's not invincible, and I do wonder whether Carlos will take a lot of confidence. Even though I know he was ill from that Cincinnati, those 5 games he played, I imagine he will. Carlos will be prepared, so will Jannik, but I'm going to stick with Carlos. Let me know in the comment section below what you think and why. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you next video.